I'm sorry I married you. You'll never be good enough for someone like me. James uttered those words with the same smug superiority he used to criticize my clothes or comment on my professional achievements. My name is Rachel, and at 34, I stood in the kitchen of our home, listening to my husband of 6 years explain why I didn't meet his standards. The argument had started over something trivial. I bought the wrong brand of coffee, but as always, it devolved into his favorite topic, my flaws. I looked him directly in the eyes, leaning against our granite countertop. I observed his self-satisfied expression, his perfectly ironed shirt, his carefully styled hair. 6 years of marriage, and he still acted as if he'd done me a favor by choosing me. We'll see about that, I replied quietly, firmly, though inside a storm raged. His smile faltered. For a moment he probably expected tears or pleas, promises to be better, to measure up. I grabbed my car keys and walked towards the door. Where are you going? He asked, his voice laced with confusion. Rachel, don't be dramatic. You know I'm just trying to help you improve. To improve, as if I were a project, a house in need of repairs that he was already tired of. Suddenly, every critical comment I'd endured over the years flashed through my mind: my simple wardrobe, my less than stellar career, my inadequacies. I'm just going to the gym, I replied. It was true, but for the first time I wasn't going because James had implied my jeans were too tight. I was going because I wanted to, because I needed to do something for me. In the car I didn't cry. I didn't scream or call my friends to vent about my husband's cruelty. Instead, I made a mental list, a plan. James thought I'd never be good enough. Well, we'd see just how insufficient I was when I walked away from him. At the gym, I signed up for personal training sessions not to meet James's standards, but to feel strong, to remember what it felt like to have my own goals and work towards something that was just for me, not for his approval. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Don't forget, we have dinner with my colleagues next week. We're something sophisticated this time. I thought of all those dinners where he'd subtly corrected my table manners, explained my job in dismissive terms in front of his peers, or presented me as an accessory, not his partner. I smiled to myself. I replied to his message, pretending everything was normal, as if his words hadn't left a mark. For weeks until that dinner, and James had no idea what was coming. The next morning before work, I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer. James didn't even notice I left earlier than usual. He was too busy criticizing the breakfast I'd made. The eggs are overcooked again, he sighed, as if my culinary skills were a personal offense. I don't understand why you can't master something so simple. You're right, I replied calmly. I guess I'll never be as perfect as your mother. He didn't catch my sarcasm and launched into another story about his mother's legendary breakfast-making abilities. I let him talk while mentally reviewing my to-do list. Lawyer, bank accounts, apartment hunting. Each item was a step closer to my freedom. At work, I decided to lead a major marketing campaign I'd previously hesitated to accept. James always insinuated I wasn't ready for significant responsibilities. You should be content with your current position. Not everyone can be ambitious, he'd say, as if ambition were a privilege reserved for him. My boss noticed the shift immediately. This is excellent work, Rachel, he said, reviewing my proposal. I've been waiting for this from you. In fact, there's an opening for senior marketing director. I think you should consider it. A month ago, I would have hesitated. I would have heard James's voice in my head, listing all the reasons why I wasn't qualified. But instead, I smiled and told him I would love to apply. That night, while James worked late, I took out our wedding photo album and flipped through it silently. I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked so different, but because I remembered how I'd felt that day: confident, worthy, loved. When had I started to believe his subtle digs, his constant insinuations that I was somehow not enough? My phone buzzed with a text from my college roommate Sarah. We'd lost touch over time. James never liked her direct, strong personality. Haven't heard from you in ages. Let's grab coffee soon. I thought of all the friendships I'd let fade because James found my friends too loud, too ambitious, too independent. Slowly, I had isolated myself until his opinion was the only one that mattered. I smiled and texted Sarah back. Tomorrow afternoon? I'll text you to confirm. That night, James arrived home late, smelling of expensive whiskey. The partners, he announced, loosening his tie. You should have seen their wives, so elegant, so polished. Why can't you put in that kind of effort? I really looked at him for the first time. I no longer saw the impressive man he pretended to be, but someone small, someone who could only feel big by making others feel small. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I'll never be that kind of wife. He smiled, convinced I was finally accepting my limitations. He had no idea I was already planning my escape. The following weeks were a carefully orchestrated dance. While James continued his usual criticisms, I set my plan in motion. I opened a bank account in my name and started transferring my salary. The lawyer had confirmed what I already suspected: the money I earned was mine. Despite James's constant insinuations that everything we had was thanks to him, Sarah helped me find a beautiful apartment across town. Modern and full of light, everything James would surely hate. Too feminine, he would have said, as if that were an insult. I signed the lease in my name only, something I hadn't done since before our marriage. At work, I threw myself into the application for the senior director position. My presentation to the board was scheduled for the same day as James's dinner with his colleagues, the dinner where he expected me to play the role of the submissive, perfect wife one last time. Don't forget about Thursday, he reminded me during breakfast. The partners' wives will be there. Try to do something with your hair before then. And please wear that blue dress I bought you. At least that one is appropriate. The blue dress, the one he'd picked out to fix my wardrobe, arguing that my own choices were too colorful, too daring to me. They weren't what the wife of a partner at his law firm should wear, according to him. Of course, I said, spreading butter on my toast. I want everything to be perfect. James smiled, pleased with my apparent submissiveness. You're finally learning. Not too late, maybe. There's still hope for you. I thought of the red dress hanging in the closet of my new apartment, the one I'd bought for my board presentation. A dress that screamed confidence and ambition. Everything James had tried to extinguish in me. My phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. Everything's ready. Whenever you are. Another message arrived from Sarah. The apartment's perfect. You're going to love the view. And one more from my boss. The board is excited for your presentation on Thursday. You've got this. James noticed my small smile. Good news? He asked. Just work stuff, I replied calmly. Nothing important. He continued his usual spiel about how I should be happy with my comfortable position, about how not everyone was meant for leadership roles. I let his words wash over me, but they no longer held their sting. That night, I packed a small bag while he was in the shower. Just the essentials for the next few days. The rest of my things were already in my new apartment. I'd moved them piece by piece over the past few weeks. Going to the gym again? He called out as I headed for the door. You're certainly dedicated lately. Though maybe you should focus more on cardio than weights. You wouldn't want to look too muscular. I'm just trying to improve, I replied, using his favorite phrase. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Thursday arrived on perfect cue. My board presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m., giving me ample time before James's dinner at 7. He'd left early that morning, reminding me one last time to wear the blue dress, fix my hair, and try to be presentable for once. At 2 p.m., I stood before the board, wearing my red dress, my presentation meticulously prepared. This wasn't just about a potential promotion. It was a declaration of independence. For 6 years, James had told me I didn't have what it took to be a leader. That thought vanished as I confidently explained my vision for the company's future. Outstanding presentation, Rachel, the CEO said when I finished. The position is yours if you want it. But I have to ask, why now? You've always had this capability. I thought of James's voice in my head. All the times I'd held myself back because he'd convinced me I wasn't ready, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't meant for more. Let's just say I finally realized my worth, I replied. At 6:30 p.m., I entered the upscale restaurant where James's dinner was being held. I wasn't wearing the demure blue dress he'd chosen for me. Instead, I wore my red dress, fresh from my boardroom triumph. I was celebrating my promotion with Sarah. As I walked into the restaurant, James's eyes widened at the sight of me. A mixture of confusion and anger flashed across his face. What are you wearing? He hissed as I approached. I smiled calmly. I told you, James. Before he could respond, one of the partners interrupted. Is this your wife? You're Rachel. We've heard so much about you. I smiled, watching James tense. I wondered what exactly he'd told them about me. All good, I hope, I replied, sliding gracefully into my seat. James mentioned you're in marketing, another partner's wife commented. Before James could downplay my career, as he usually did, I smiled confidently. That's right. In fact, I just accepted a position as Senior Marketing Director at Maxwell Brooks. The table erupted in congratulations. Maxwell Brooks was one of the most prestigious firms in the city, and coincidentally, one of the most important clients of James's law firm. His face paled. Senior Director? One of the partners said, impressed. James never mentioned your wife was so talented. This recent, James managed to say, trying to regain control. Though I've always encouraged Rachel's modest ambitions. Modest? The partner laughed. Maxwell Brooks has been trying to poach talent from our marketing department for years. They only hire the best. I watched James struggle to maintain his composure as his carefully constructed narrative of his disappointing wife crumbled with every compliment from his colleagues, every impressed glance, every conversation that highlighted my competence. We should celebrate, he finally said, trying to take credit as he always did. I knew you had it in you. With my support, of course. Actually, I interrupted gently, we need to talk. After dinner. Dinner felt interminable. Each minute ticked by as James alternated between trying to regain control and watching his carefully constructed image unravel. Every time he attempted to minimize my achievements, someone at the table inadvertently contradicted him. James always says you're still finding your professional path, one of the partner's wives commented kindly. Actually, another partner interrupted. Maxwell Brooks poached our entire marketing team last month. They must have seen something special in Rachel to offer her a director position. I saw James clench his jaw, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his wine glass. 6 years of telling everyone, including me, that I was less, and it was all falling apart in a single evening. Excuse us for a moment, James said, finally taking my elbow. As we stepped away, he hissed, you're making a fool of me. Isn't this what you wanted? I replied calmly. That dress, that attitude. You're embarrassing me. I looked at his fingers digging into my arm, then back at his face. No, James. You've been embarrassing yourself for years. I finally stopped helping you do it. His face hardened. We'll discuss this at home. There's nothing to discuss. The papers are on your desk. I moved out last week. The color drained from his face. What? You said I'd never be good enough for someone like you, I reminded him softly. Turns out you were right. He began. I'm better off, I interrupted. You can't really leave me. You're nothing without me. He whispered. Who do you think made you who you are? I smiled. I smiled genuinely for the first time in years. That's exactly the problem, James. You actually believe that. Just like you believe those partners respect you when they actually just tolerate you. Just like you believe belittling others makes you bigger. You're being hysterical. I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time since we met, I said, glancing back at the table where his colleagues sat, pretending not to watch us. We should be more honest with them about who we really are. He took a step back, his facade cracking completely. Rachel, wait, I waited for 6 years. I waited for you to see me as an equal, to value me, to love me instead of trying to diminish me. I'm done waiting. Let's just go home, he pleaded, his voice trembling, losing its usual arrogance. We can talk about this. I'll do better. I'll get counseling. The time for that was 6 years ago, I replied. Or 3 years ago when I begged you to try therapy together. Or even last month before you told me I'd never be good enough. His eyes darted around the restaurant, aware of the attention we were attracting. James hated scenes. Unless he was the one creating them. To belittle me. You're upset. I understand. The promotion has gone to your head, but this isn't you're not Rachel. The dress, the attitude. This isn't the woman I married. You're right. Because the woman you married still believed she needed your approval to exist. She believed your lies about her worth. She thought your criticisms were love. One of the partners approached. Is everything all right here? Fine, James said quickly. Just a little disagreement. Actually, I interrupted, I'm leaving. Tomorrow's a busy day, what with my new home and job. I turned back to James. The divorce papers are on your desk. Your lawyer also has a copy. Don't worry, I'm not asking for anything. You can keep all the furniture you picked out, all the clothes you dictated for me, all the pieces of the life you tried to force me into. His face contorted with panic. Divorce? Rachel, you can't be serious. You'll never be good enough for someone like me, I quoted his words back to him. Those weren't just words, James. They were permission. Permission to finally believe I deserve better. The partner was still there, standing, witnessing the crumbling of James's carefully constructed world. The other diners were no longer pretending they weren't watching. Rachel, please, James tried one last time. I love you. You loved possessing me, controlling me, making me small enough to fit in your pocket. But I'm done being small. I turned to the partner. I'm sorry to cut the evening short. Thank you for your hospitality. Then to James, don't try to contact me. All communication goes through the lawyers from now on. As I walked away, I heard the partner ask, everything okay, James? Fine, James replied automatically. Rachel's just being dramatic. Really? The partner's voice followed. Because from where I'm standing, she sounds perfectly reasonable. Perhaps we should discuss your position at the firm tomorrow. I smiled as I stepped out into the warm evening air. My new apartment was waiting for me, open and bright, filled with colors James would hate. My new job started Monday. My new life was already beginning. The fallout from that dinner rippled through our social circles like a tidal wave. James tried to control the narrative, claiming I was having a midlife crisis, that the promotion had changed me, that I'd become unstable. But his carefully crafted image had cracked too publicly for anyone to fully believe him. His colleagues had seen too much that night, the way he'd grabbed my arm, the desperation in his voice, the mask slipping to reveal the insecure man beneath. His partner's wives, whom he'd always used as examples of proper behavior, were now sharing stories of his condescending comments over the years. He always made little jokes about Rachel. One of them confessed to mutual friends. We thought she was just quiet and insecure. But now we realize he'd been systematically undermining her for years. At work, my new position included an office overlooking the city. I filled it with everything James had deemed inappropriate: bright artwork, comfortable furniture, family photos that showed me smiling with friends he disapproved of. Every day, I felt more myself and less like the shadow I'd become during our marriage. Sarah helped me rediscover old passions: photography, hiking, taking cooking classes for fun instead of to meet James's standards. I forgot how much you used to laugh, she said during one of our weekend adventures. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to my preparation. James alternated between threats and pleas, sending long emails about how I was ruining our lives. Each one revealed more of his true nature: the control he masked as concern, the criticism he disguised as care. You're making a fool of yourself, he wrote. Everyone sees how you've changed, how you're no longer the sweet, modest woman I married. I forwarded every message from him to my lawyer without replying. Let him show the world exactly who he was, I thought. His mother called, trying to mediate. James tells me you've become quite difficult, she said, her tone echoing the one he'd always used. He's just trying to help you be your best self, she added. No, I replied. He's just trying to make me someone small enough to make him feel big. I'm done being small. News of my promotion spread quickly through our social circle, along with the stories of the dinner where I finally stood up for myself. Women I'd known for years started reaching out, sharing their own stories of controlling partners, of rediscovering themselves, of choosing their own worth over someone else's approval. My new apartment became a sanctuary of self-discovery. I painted the walls in colors James would have hated, bought furniture for comfort and not appearance, and started hosting dinner parties where laughter mattered more than proper etiquette. One evening, as I was leaving work, I ran into one of the partners from that fateful dinner. James is on probation at the firm, he told me. That night opened our eyes to some concerning patterns in his behavior. Several junior associates have complained about his management style since then. I wasn't surprised. James's need to feel superior wasn't limited to our marriage. We do a lot of business with Maxwell Brooks, and we look forward to working with you in a professional capacity, the partner added. 3 months into my new life, James made one last attempt to regain control. He showed up at my office unannounced, wearing the contrite expression he always used after his cruelest moments. You've made your point, he said, standing in my doorway. You've proven to everyone that you can succeed without me. Now let's drop this nonsense and come home. I looked at him from behind my desk, taking in how small he seemed now. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide his desperation. and his practiced smile couldn't mask his fear of losing his favorite possession. This isn't about proving anything, I replied. It's about finally living my life without your constant criticisms, your subtle digs, your need to make me feel less. I was trying to help you improve. You were trying to tear me down to build yourself up. There's a difference. He stepped into my office uninvited, his eyes scanning the decor. He would have once criticized the awards I'd won since starting my new position, the photos of me and my friends smiling living. You've changed, he accused. I haven't changed. I've just remembered who I was before you convinced me I needed to be different. My assistant appeared at the doorway. Everything all right, Rachel? Yes, he's just leaving. James flushed, implying that I might need her to remove him. I'm her husband, ex-husband, I corrected. The divorce was finalized last week. You signed the papers. Remember? His face darkened. You're making a mistake. You'll never find anyone else at your age. You'll end up alone. I'd rather be alone than spend another minute letting you convince me I'm not enough. I stood up, putting myself at his level. You can leave now, or security can assist you with your choice. He left, but not before one last attempt. Your success won't last without me to guide you. My success started the moment I stopped letting you guide me. Goodbye, James. Later that night, over dinner with Sarah and other friends, I shared the encounter. Instead of sympathy, I received congratulations. To Rachel, Sarah toasted, proving the best revenge is living well and letting them see it. The women around the table, successful, vibrant, raised their glasses. Some shared their own stories of breaking free from controlling partners, of rediscovering their worth, of choosing themselves. James's words about ending up alone rang hollow against the sound of laughter and friendship that filled the restaurant. This was what he had tried to keep me from: genuine connections, real joy, a life lived on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss. Another successful campaign. Another reason to celebrate. In the 6 months since I left James, my career had taken off. Turns out, confidence blooms quickly when you stop letting someone clip your wings. You're radiant, a friend observed. Freedom looks good on you, I replied. A year after that dinner where I finally confronted James, I attended the same company's annual gala, this time as a valued business partner instead of someone's quiet wife. I wore red again, a different dress, but with the same confidence that had begun my journey to freedom. James wasn't there. He'd taken a position at a smaller firm after his probation ended, and he was edged out of his old one. Through the grapevine, I heard he was attempting to date younger women, promising to help them reach their potential, repeating his old patterns, looking for new targets. The partners' wives he'd once used as examples of proper behavior had become my friends and allies. We should have said something sooner, one friend told me during the gala. We saw what he was doing to you. How he dimmed your light every time you started to shine. My success had only grown over the year. The marketing campaigns I spearheaded had generated record profits, earning me a seat on the executive board. Every accomplishment felt sweeter because it was truly mine, not something I had to diminish to protect someone else's ego. Sarah nudged me during dinner, gesturing to how many people were drawn to my table, my conversation, my genuine laughter. Remember when James used to tell you to be quieter? To take up less space? I remembered. I remembered every time he told me to be less ambitious, less outgoing, less me. Now, being more had become my revolution. The last I heard of James was through a LinkedIn update. He posted a long message about personal growth and learning from past mistakes. The comments were full of platitudes, but those who knew him saw it for what it was: another attempt to rewrite his story, to cast himself as the hero of his own redemption. My own story had evolved beyond him. The quiet wife he tried to contain had become someone who mentored other women, who spoke at conferences, who lived life in full color instead of the muted tones he'd prescribed. At a leadership summit where I was speaking, a young woman approached me. My boyfriend keeps telling me I'm too ambitious and I need to tone it down so he's more comfortable, she confided. He just says he's trying to help me be better. I recognized James's words coming from another man's mouth, the same pattern of control disguised as care. Someone who genuinely wants to help you be better, I told her, would never start by telling you you're not enough. Later that night, looking out at the city from my apartment, my space, my life, my choices, I thought of James's parting words. You'll never be good enough. He'd said them like a prison sentence, but they became my liberation. because he was right in a way. I would never be good enough for someone who needed me to be less than who I am. And finally, that was more than enough for me.